Welcome everybody to the Dynasty Throb. Oh, we're not. Welcome everybody to the Dynasty Pulse. We are your crew right here exclusively on Fantasy Sports Advice Network. I'm bigz. I got Grindberg down there. Chev, the legendary ball knower, is in the house. Schultzy, Coach Retzlaff. We are here for you. Fantasy Sports Advice Network exclusive. We are on the Undroppables. We are on the Fantasy Football Pulse, and we are here to talk Dynasty, Fantasy, Football, and fill your ear holes. Whether the aperture on your ear holes is small or wide, we are here for it.
Euphemisms, bud.
Euphemisms are good.
Yeah,
So
fill your ear holes.
Let's get into it.
Yeah, well, we got a steady show here, folks. We got a couple stories to go along, and then we got some fantasy dynasty face-offs that are going to be pretty awesome because a couple of guys that are tightly knit in the dynasty rankings. We're going to talk about their outlook and who we prefer long-term here. So let's get this party started with our top story, and that is Kellen Moore is now the new head coach of the New Orleans Saints. You know, he's had some success, changing quarterbacks and, with the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Eagles. He brings a modern approach to their passing game, especially utilizing play action, pre-snap motion. Historically, his offenses have been highly efficient with those play actions. So how does that look for Derek Carr if he is their quarterback in 2025, sorry. The style should help him become a more consistent low-end QB1, in my opinion. So Chev, with Kellen Moore's history of maximizing passing efficiency, if Derek Carr is the quarterback for the Saints, do you see him breaking through? bigz was high on him headed into this season, and he looked that part headed in and after the first couple of games, and then, injuries plagued that team. So is he in that conversation for QB1 in Dynasty, or is he just like a flash in the pan?
I think Derek Carr is one of the most interesting dynasty quarterbacks because he shows up as a quarterback one out of nowhere. And then he'll just turn right back into a pumpkin right before your eyes. And I think the most telling part of this whole deal is the fact that Kellen Moore was somewhat non-committal in his commitment to Derek Carr and just as his quarterback for 2025 and beyond. Now, we got to look at a couple things. We got to look at the fact that Derek Carr has a $40 million cap hit this year and a $50 million cap hit next year. And I don't think that there's any way for the Saints to work around that. They've got around $48 million in dead cap space as it is right now, or dead cap money. They're $55 million over the projected cap. We don't know what that number is yet, but
Money laundering.
it doesn't. Say it again.
Money laundering. Keep going.
Yeah. So all of these things, we know the cap's not really real, but for the Saints, the chickens are going to have to come home to roost at some point. And I think it's just time to embrace the suck. And if they're gonna tank, let's do it. Let's do it the right way. Send Derek Carr somewhere else and go ahead and win 2 games or however many you're gonna win with the beauty pageant guy and Ginger Spencer Rattler at quarterback. So, I don't think that he should be the quarterback in New Orleans because of the fact that they're not going anywhere and they've kicked the can down the road far enough. So let's give Kellen Moore his whatever standard 3 years that you gave Dan Campbell to turn the Detroit Lions from just a complete clown show into a powerhouse team. And let's start evaluating him once he gets some of the dead cap money off. And it starts with Derek Carr. Just go ahead and embrace the fact that, you're going to eat this dead cap. Your team's going to suck. You're going to have to watch Spencer Rattler play quarterback, which, that's just not fun for anybody other than his parents. And let's just get it over.
Might not even be fun for them. I don't know.
Yeah, they watched him on QB1. This is not going to be an enjoyable experience for anybody. So
you'd probably rather watch Severance.
Yeah. Hey, on streaming on Apple TV and Apple Plus.
Alone, Australia.
Good day, mate.
Dude, I'm in the same boat as Chev. We look at Derek Carr, right? When he's been a fantasy QB1, everything around him has been very good, right? He's played with some good weapons. He's been in some solid offenses. this team sucked, man. Like, nobody wanted this job. Kellen Moore might not even wanted this job, but he knew he had to take it, right? This team sucks. The job sucks. I just don't see a path for this to work out for Derek Carr. And yeah, Chev nailed it. This is a multi-year project here. This isn't a get a new guy in and flip the script quick. Like, this is going to take some time.
I mean, even to that point, like they signed 2 free agents last year. They signed Willie Gay and they signed Cedric Wilson. Those are the 2 free agents they signed because they didn't really have any cap space, and they don't really have any cap space now. They're gonna have to do some like Simone Biles level gymnastics with the cap in order to get just under the cap to have room to sign anyone for 2025. So I don't think that it's gonna work out. Yeah, it started off really well. Again, Derek Carr will have flashes of being a competent quarterback and being good, and then he turns back into a pumpkin the minute you pick him up off waivers and you put up 64 points that week because you're like, it's time. But in Dynasty, you might have him as your QB3 or something like that. I would suggest trying to get off of that right now, unless you believe he's going to upgrade situations by being traded, which honestly, any situation other than maybe Tennessee would be an upgrade to where he's at right now.
Well, I think I can safely say that I'm the one person with the longest Derek Carr history here. And if there's one thing that I know about Derek Carr, it's that he's a team first guy. Money is not his driving force. And if there's an opportunity for him to, quote, keep the band together and maybe restructure a deal that makes it affordable for the Saints to give him, I don't know, maybe an NFL quality offensive lineman, which he hasn't seemed to have had in New Orleans. We have to remember that the last couple of years in New Orleans, he's been hurt more than in his entire career leading up to that. He has had absolutely no protection in front of him. The book is out on the New Orleans Saints offensive line. You blitz on third down and you will get home. So watching as much Derek Carr play football as I do, that's the one thing that I've noticed, that he has not had any supporting cast in front of him whatsoever. And I think that's Kellen Moore's first charge. He doesn't have a Jalen Hurts type quarterback in Derek Carr. He doesn't have a Dak Prescott type quarterback in Derek Carr. He doesn't have a Justin Herbert type quarterback in Derek Carr. So he doesn't have that in Spencer Rattler or Jake Haener either. So this is a story where it's a new regime that's coming in that's going to try and put the pieces together. If Kellen Moore feels like he can win with a pocket passer like Derek Carr, he's going to go ahead and do it. And Derek Carr is going to restructure and be a rah-rah, root, gold and black guy for the Saints. And that'll last for a year or two. There's not a lot of wiggle room as far as his contract is concerned. If he doesn't restructure, not a lot of teams are going to be willing to go after that. So as far as a dynasty asset, I can't see any reason for having Derek Carr on your team. If you can get a 4th or 5th rounder for him for some super needy team, there's really no market for Derek Carr right now. And I don't see one that is going to make itself happen over the coming offseason.
Well, bigz, it begs the question, with all that said, given Kellen Moore's tendency to feature a clear wide receiver 1, how do you project over, talking about the weapons, Chris Olave's dynasty value in 2025? Can Olave crack the wide receiver 1 tier, or is there still too much competition for targets in New Orleans? And of course, you spoke to a little bit of what's going on with the quarterback situation with Derek Carr.
The quarterback situation is everything for Chris Olave entering 2025. If the Saints are going into it thinking Spencer Rattler is our guy, I am stashing Chris Olave for a year. If it's Derek Carr, I think Olave can crack that top 15 wide receiver range. But if that's not the plan, or if they're going to take a later round quarterback in the rookie class, they're obviously not going to go out and get Sam Darnold. Maybe they get a sinking Russell Wilson, that kind of thing. It's too hard to pinpoint what Olave's ceiling is going to be for 2025 without any clarification at the quarterback position. But obviously, if there is a little bit of upgrade to the offensive line and they have a competent quarterback that has been around that isn't named Spencer Rattler, I do think that Olave's ceiling is pretty quarterback proof.
Now on Olave, speaking more to him, heading into his fourth year, missed 9 games last year, suffered that concussion and had continuous symptoms. Really thought about, I think he was really evaluating his career. Players go through a lot, even though they may be young. They definitely go through a lot of deliberation when these concussions come up. 13.2 and 14.5 are his fantasy points per game in 2022 and 2023. Olave's 14.5 fantasy points per game was good enough for 19th at wide receiver in 2023. Olave never hit our desired fantasy ceiling so far. Olave really has the makings and ability to be a wide receiver 1 for the New Orleans Saints. However, he and Derek Carr never really got on the same page, it seems. In 2023, Olave, 12th in targets with 138, 6th in air yards, 12th in air yard share, 4th in deep targets with 32. And now here's where it gets good, and it explains. These are all top 12 metrics for Olave in the prime year that he had where he was healthy. 3rd in unrealized air yards. So Olave's career can really be summed up so far. Unrealized potential, whether it be fault of his own or surroundings, unrealized air yards, and unrealized outcome to this point. Still, Olave will be entering his age 25 season, a bullish change at quarterback, and we shall see, and Kellen Moore support. There's every reason to believe that Olave can thrive. A problem is I'm seeing, when we talk about what is going to be target competition, and later in our mock draft that we'll have, Tetairoa McMillan presents a prime pick target at 9 for the Saints in the NFL draft. So it should be very curious to see who will be the quarterback, and then will there be more competition for Chris Olave, Tetairoa McMillan? Maybe the Saints get their own Drake London.
They also have A.T. Perry coming back. They have Rashid Shaheed coming back, both off of injury. And one sleeper pick that I like for the Saints is, with their history of taking the Senior Bowl game MVP each of the last 2 years, look for Jack Besh, who's a local guy from Lafayette, Louisiana, that could very well wind up in the black and gold. He would be a nice little addition to that wide receiver core. And he's a guy that plays. He doesn't succumb to injury a lot. So I think he could be a very reliable pass catcher alongside Chris Olave. Maybe take some of the contact away from Olave. We know Olave can cook. We've seen Derek Carr before elevate, unlike some red and yellow quarterbacks. Derek Carr has taken guys that were off the radar before and actually given them career years, like Zay Jones. We saw him do it with Michael Crabtree. Aguilar is another one. Guys can operate with Derek Carr and actually elevate their careers. We didn't get to see it enough from Devontae Adams because of the situation there, but we could definitely see it with Chris Olave and Derek Carr having a full season together.
What about the accusations that at this stage of his career, Derek Carr is a check-down merchant to somebody like Alvin Kamara? What would you say to that, bigz? With your, Derek Carr through and through.
If I'm the New Orleans Saints quarterback, I'm throwing to Alvin Kamara as often as damn possible because I have no time to do anything else. But if you look historically over Derek Carr's career, he's up there with Geno Smith as one of the most underrated deep passers in the game. And if he has time, if he's got some protection in front of him, he can chuck it, and he's got accuracy downfield. And I keep waiting for the right situation for that kid to shine because, he's a guy that I've been a fan of, and I know that good things can happen in the right situation.
Totally. I love it. All right, guys, let's move on to the next story here, and that is the free agent frenzy. We know that the franchise tag window is about to open. So with this class, the 2025, it's got some talent, especially in the running back position. So these wide receiver free agents are going to be coveted this offseason. So guys like Tee Higgins, he is going to be the number one person in the market, especially if he's outside of the Bengals organization, the number one receiver for many teams outside of Cincinnati. He's got that blend, size, catch radius. He's only 26. He's entering the prime of his career and could be an asset if he lands in the right spot. Chris Godwin, who was on pace for over 1,300 yards, is a guy that is also going to be in the market here. You know, some older guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs are all going to be around. And then the running backs, these guys are the ones that I'm going to be more intrigued about seeing where they land, especially with how solid this running back class is. We talked about it on our last show and the show before, how solid this running back class is and how much depth it has, especially in rounds 2 and 3. And we'll probably dig into that a little bit further into our mock draft later on in the Dynasty Pulse after party. So let's talk about these running backs. Aaron Jones, you know, he's coming off a decent season in 2024. You know, he's primed to find a role somewhere. Najee Harris is another guy that's in that range of free agency. We'll see what Pittsburgh has to offer for him, but let's talk about Tee Higgins now, Schultzy. He's the biggest name on the market here. He's set to be a free agent. Do you think he will emerge as a wide receiver one for another team automatically, or will he be suited to our wide receiver two? I mean, obviously, landing spot has a little bit to say about here, but Tee Higgins is a prominent wide receiver, so you would think he would land in that wide receiver one range, no?
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt at this point if he leaves the Bengals, he will be a team's wide receiver one, right? Like that's the trajectory he's on, right? No doubt about that. As far as fantasy wide receiver one, I'm skeptical. Now he's coming off his best season fantasy points per game wise, 18.5. I mean, to do that in his 12 games, he killed it, man, with 911 yards, 10 touchdowns. And that's just playing second fiddle to Jamar Chase. One concern I have here, right, is this offense just throws the ball, scores an assload of points. So we got Joe Burrow just threw 4,500 yards, more than that. He was getting, I think, 4,800, 49, and almost 45 touchdowns. That doesn't happen like anymore. And so no wonder you're going to have two receivers putting up monster numbers. Okay. No matter where he goes, let's just knock off Jamar Chase's stats here. You're still looking at 3,200 yard passer with 2,500 touchdowns, 25 touchdowns. So without Jamar Chase's numbers, this is still like a pretty solid season, you know? I just don't see another team carrying the volume he's going to need. And then one concern here is he's a guy who he contested ball guy. He goes up and gets lots of jump balls. But one thing we know about dudes like that is they tend to not get themselves open, right? If you're often making contested jump balls, it's because guys are on you, right? So he's doing that, not getting himself open frequently as second fiddle. So if he's going to be taking the primary coverage all the time, I have a little bit of pause there. I don't have much concern overall as him being like a good wide receiver too. So like, I'm not saying like Tee Higgins stinks, but I think some of those reservations hold me back from calling him an easy wide receiver one.
Well. Look at what we have here. Good old-fashioned disagreement. So I view this as if he leaves and he goes to, let's say, if he goes to New England or if the Chargers throw the bag at him, I view this as just almost a one-to-one Stephon Diggs type of free me from Minnesota and I land somewhere where I get 160 targets and you realize how awesome I am. Now, the thing about Tee Higgins is he's a 3D receiver. So he wins vertically, he can win horizontally, and then we know he wins horizontally. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, and then he wins.
Euphemisms.
And then he wins at the catch point. So you're not going to defeat Tee Higgins in a jump ball situation. Jack Besh calls 50-50 balls, 75-25 balls, and I think that applies to Tee Higgins in even more applicable terms than it does for Jack Besh. All due respect to the Senior Bowl MVP. So I think if Tee Higgins ends up in a situation where he's the primary target, where he's going to earn 140 targets, that easily turns into – he averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game in the 10 games that he played this year and put up almost 1,000 yards. If he is allowed to be the primary target, it's just a matter of if you're going to get 10 games or 15 games. If you get 15 games, I think he's going to score somewhere around 270 fantasy points. He's a touchdown machine. He's a touchdown. He scores touchdowns on top of the fact that he wins in multiple different ways. He's not just a big contested catch guy, although he can do that as good as any receiver that we've seen. Like, I think he's a reskin of Brandon Marshall. And so give him the volume, and I think that he turns into an instant top 10 receiver from a dynasty perspective.
Awesome. I do agree with that a lot. I mean, he's got the profile, so I'm interested to see what your thoughts on him right now. I'm going to quick question for you then there, Chev. Tee Higgins in a new environment or George Pickens?
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Because it's important. It's an important
you're right.
question.
It is. We do have a duty, and I would be derelicting that duty. The thought of this question makes me the opposite of bricked up in the cement aisle, because I have been a George Pickens truther, and I've waited for something along the lines of what we got from Tee Higgins in terms of touchdown equity this year from George Pickens, whether it's him dropping the ball or him doing some weird stuff and not getting both feet down magically. I think that you can rely on Tee Higgins to be a more steady performer. Now, if for some reason they get a competent quarterback and a competent offensive coordinator pairing, I know ifs and buts, candy and nuts, all that good stuff. But if George Pickens' quarterback situation changes to something remotely tenable, then my answer will change. But I have to go with Tee Higgins now, because we've seen George Pickens short circuit and just kill your fantasy team after showing flashes of the brilliance that he's capable of.
Yeah, Biggs, do you have anything to add to that? I know, we're both.
I got to go throw up a little bit in my mouth.
But I mean, you sold me on Tee Higgins this year. On George Pickens this year, and now,
I apologize. I'm sorry.
No, you did. I mean,
no, he's talking to me.
No, I fully agreed with him. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was on board with the George Pickens, and now it's just like it's a situation, and it's tough to decipher.
Well, one of the things so I would not move off of George Pickens ahead of Tee Higgins. I still value George Pickens higher than I value Tee Higgins. One of the things, looking kind of like deep into his stats, the best year that he had is 2022 so far. It's the only time. Well, he's had 2 full seasons in his career. He's been in the league for 5 seasons. He's managed to avoid injury and play in every single game in just 2 of those 5 seasons. So he doesn't exactly have the injury track record that I like. He also has only 2 out of those 5 seasons where he's eclipsed 1,000 yards. In 2022, he had an 18% target share. Now, granted, this is the Cincinnati Bengals team that features Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I want to say that 2022 was Jamar Chase's rookie season. Tee Higgins, in his career high 17-game season, was only able to slice out an 18% target share. He hasn't ever been the wide receiver 1. I don't know if he actually can be the wide receiver 1, but he's certainly a great complement at wide receiver 2. 4 of his 5 seasons, he's eclipsed 900 yards. Do I want that on my wide receiver 2? Absolutely. But it's exactly what I get with Jacoby Myers over in Las Vegas. So regardless of where Tee Higgins lands, I'm putting him in the same tier as Jacoby Myers, somebody that has the potential to reach around and I didn't say that properly, reach the potential of 1,000 yard season.
Yeah, euphemisms.
About 10 touchdowns. Even if he gets a huge bag, gosh darn it. Even if somebody
pays him a lot of American dollars.
Tee Higgins, the biggest wide receiver contract of the offseason in 2025, make him the highlight wide receiver and try and get him to that 140 target share. I don't know if he's going to be able to find that situation. Is Drake May going to be able to throw 140 or 150 times to him? Is he going to find that if he like goes to Vegas and now he's got Jacoby Myers, who's basically a production clone of his, and he's got Brock Bowers to deal with? There are a lot of situations in which Tee Higgins is the narrative. He is the noise right now, and I'm looking for the signal. So I keep him out of my top 24. I see him as top 12 ceiling. So somewhere in the teens is where I'm valuing him. And, that's like I was an early adopter of Tee Higgins in Dynasty, and I moved off him a couple years ago because he was a frustrating boomer bust every week guy. And I have never been happier since I stopped ownership of him.
Hey, and look, funny enough, with the market current, Tee Higgins, wide receiver 13 on underdog at the 2-3 turn. And then in round 5, pick 57, George Pickens is wide receiver 32. So I know that's current, it's redraft, but part of what goes into Dynasty, what goes into market values right now, they get a little more fluid and in alignment. So you can take advantage of this sentiment where people are more on, and I'm not going to say more on too quickly together, all right? More on that. Tee Higgins, you can take advantage, get a trade, tier down to George Pickens. What kind of plus do you think you could get with George Pickens for Tee Higgins with how hot the market is for Tee Higgins?
Do we think get Jacoby Myers and George Pickens for Tee Higgins?
There you go.
I would do that. I would do that in a heartbeat.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really savvy move to get a guy like Pickens plus.
No, I was saying I would trade both of those guys for Tee Higgins.
Oh no, all right. I'm on the opposite side. One final thing for me on Higgins on player profiler efficiency metrics, target separation 1.32, which was 84th in the league. Contested catch rate was 51.7, which is good on 29 targets, but we laud this guy as being like cream of the crop, and he was only 16th in the league at contested catch rate. He's still good at it. I'm not saying that he's not, but those are some things that give me a little bit of concern from just immediately calling this guy a surefire wide receiver 1.
Yeah, and that's fair. It is a fair assessment. Let's move on to our face-offs because we talked a little bit about the news stories. We got to get into the Dynasty.
I'm gonna take your face.
Let's
off.
Let's talk about our face-offs here. So we pegged a couple guys that are very close in Dynasty rankings right now at the same positions. So position skilled players. Our first one is a fun one. I know that Schultzy is going to be, raring to go when we talk about Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy, and they are so close in rankings right now, both bringing promising futures, but facing distinct challenges. Lawrence, the former number 1 overall pick, has yet to truly live up to his expectation and potential. He's been battling, inconsistencies, but lack of support around him in Jacksonville. New head coach Liam Cohen is in the fold. Let's hope that Lawrence will finally find the stability and reach, that elite tier quarterback ceiling after flashing his top tier talent at times. A couple years ago, I think he finished as the QB7, if I'm not mistaken. So he's got that potential to get in the top 10. Meanwhile, Brock Purdy, he's surprisingly been steady for the 49ers, proving as an efficient game manager quarterback, but also, drop back rates, great assessments. He's playoff bound every year except for this last year, obviously. But despite a dip in stats in 2024, he had career lows in percentage, TDs, and interception ratio. Purdy's ability to thrive, though, in a structured offense. He's got security as the quarterback for the 49ers. So, Chev, with this solid floor for both these quarterbacks, which quarterback do you think has the best chance to make the leap over the next 3 seasons? Trevor Lawrence with a fresh new system and coaching staff, or Brock Purdy with its consistency of the 49ers offense?
This is Brock Purdy for me, and it's pretty easy. I think that with the offensive system, the weapons in place, if he gets Brandon Ayuk back, if he's able to get Ricky Pearsall more involved with Debo on the move, this was an offense that was trying to figure out what life was like sans Debo, with Debo still on the field. So they're obligatorily, is that a word? Obligatorily?
Yep.
Anyway, so we're gonna roll with that. If they're trying to figure out the offense post life with Debo Samuel, and he's still able to average 8.5 yards per attempt, he has 323 yards rushing and 5 rushing touchdowns. He added that to his game. He's throwing into tight windows and has almost had the second highest completion percentage in the league on tight window throws. He's everything that you want in a quarterback. It's just that he was born into a system where people thought that it was just all the weapons and it just doesn't matter. So I think the ceiling's higher. I mean, he finished as a quarterback 8 in 2023 with 440 attempts. And so I think that if that number goes north of 500, the efficiency is going to carry with it, because that's just a staple of the Shanahan system. And although I think that Trevor Lawrence can ascend and get back into the top 12 discussion, I think that Brock Purdy's going to be there if he plays with his complement of weapons on a year in, year out basis, because he now has a rushing floor. I think what Baker Mayfield did this year is what you could see multiple times from Brock Purdy if they open up the offense and let him throw the ball 500 times. And I can't pass up on that. Whereas I think Trevor Lawrence, we've seen his best season be 4,025. So he has a rushing floor, but I'm going to go with Brock Purdy because he's a better deep ball thrower, and he has the offense that we know is going to support fantasy relevance for him year over year.
I mean, I can't argue with any of that. Talent-wise, I'll take Trevor all day, every day, and I'll take Trevor on the real football field every day. But we're not playing real football, and we're playing fantasy football, right? And, yeah, Purdy's in the spot that he's going to – look, it was not great fantasy-wise for him this year in comparison. He was still QB 14, right? They had no calf for a lot of the year. The run game just didn't click like it was, which was a huge part of his success, right? He was still solid. He's not going to get worse. He's going to Chev nailed it all. The only one thing I can say for Trevor is I think Brian Thomas Jr. is more talented than anyone on the 49ers receiving core. But how much of a factor is that really going to play in pumping Trevor's fantasy stats, right? Like, Liam Cohen's going to help, sure. Brian Thomas is going to help. Liam Cohen also loves the run game. We got 2 running backs to feed here. I can't argue with any of it. I'm Trevor Lawrence's number 1 fan. I still think the ceiling is there, but it's there with Purdy too.
There are a couple things that I want to consider, especially with the Brock Purdy. And number one is your statement about nobody on the 49ers being as good as Brian Thomas Jr. And that may be a fact. However, we could see a situation in which Devontae Adams finds himself on the San Francisco 49ers for 2025. That would significantly improve Brock Purdy's stock.
I'm on my way to the cement aisle, baby.
and I am a Trevor Lawrence truther. I have been since I watched him as a freshman at Clemson. He was one of the highest scoring prospects in FF Coder's college quarterback model history, if not the number 1 of all time. And then there's another guy that we have to consider. And in thinking of over the last few seasons of quarterback reclamation products, including Dave Canales with Baker Mayfield, which Liam Cohen helped to extend last season in Tampa Bay. We also have a guy, his name is Grant Udinsky, that not a lot of people know about. And he was one of the passing game coordinators, assistant offensive coordinator under Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. And he was part of the resurrection of Sam Darnold. Now he's coming over and he's taking over the play calling in Jacksonville under Liam Cohen. There's not going to be a whole lot of miss under Liam Cohen because Grant Udinsky is going to be right there. He's a bright young mind in the football game. And I think he's in Trevor Lawrence is in really, really good hands. It's a great question, Brock Purdy versus Trevor Lawrence, just because we have Brock Purdy, who has historically over the last couple of years been one of the league leaders in fantasy points per drop back. And now if he adds a weapon like a Devontae Adams, gets rid of the baggage that is Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk comes back, Ricky Pearsall decides to have a big, huge sophomore breakout, we could see Purdy in a really, really nice situation. And then we look at the Jaguars, and they have a new regime coming in that knows what they have at quarterback and the potential that Trevor Lawrence has. So I feel like you can't really miss with either of them. And in a startup type situation, I would not have a problem with grabbing both of these guys as my QB1 and QB2 to head into the season while everybody else is taking the higher rated quarterbacks. I still think that I shade towards Brock Purdy, but I wouldn't mind going into 2025 with these as my QB1 and QB2.
I like that.
Yeah, this is I'm glad I sparked up some of these conversations, and they're only going to get more spicy as we roll through this list. So our next one, and I'm really interested to see what bigz has to say about this one. I'm pretty convinced I know where he's headed, but let's talk about Ladd McConkey versus Drake London. And now this has been spicy. These two wide receivers are definitely on the rise in fantasy dynasty formats, each offering distinct paths to fantasy relevance. McConkey, we know his rookie sensation with the Chargers. He turned heads with a dominant postseason showing, leading his team in both yardage, touchdowns in their wild card loss. But, it wasn't just that. It was the latter half of his season. He was gaining targets nonstop. He finished that game with 197 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 9 catches for 14 targets. Like, what a game. And McConkey's later season stretch was just a testament to his route running abilities, his separation skills, his yards after the catch ability. We talked about him in length in the Dynasty Pulse all season long, and it was just great to see McConkey really come in when we needed him the most in the fantasy playoffs. Meanwhile, Drake London had a breakout year in Atlanta in 2024. He finally got over the 1,000-yard mark for the first time, ending with 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns. London was a red zone machine. He finished with 23 red zone targets, third most among all wide receivers. His 30% target rate per route run shows his integral part of the Falcons offense. Michael Penix Jr. now leading the charge. He's erected himself as the go-to guy for the Falcons. Now, London, his volume is going to increase. So bigz, Ladd McConkey's explosive playoff showing, his promising connection with Herbert. Do you think he'll outpace London's red zone dominance and target share to become a top-tier wide receiver in 2025? Or do you think London's volume and scoring ability keep him ahead in the dynasty rankings?
I think Ladd McConkey is already there. Drake London, of course, is he is in the top 12 conversation. He always should be. He was the first wide receiver drafted in his class. However, one of the big things that I was sold on Ladd McConkey entering 2024, and I said this on I don't know how many shows, was Ladd McConkey is going to make himself into Justin Herbert's best friend. And that's exactly what we saw, especially down the stretch. Every time Justin Herbert needed to make a play, Ladd McConkey was going to get open. And every time Justin Herbert was able to get the ball into Ladd McConkey's hands, Ladd McConkey was able to do something with the ball and extend his yak per reception that he was putting on tape at Georgia. I think the sky is the limit for McConkey, especially if you have an offensive mind like Greg Roman, who wants to design an offense completely based around a guy that it has elite separation skills. And I'm really, really interested to see all of the metrics come back from reception perception this year on how often and how highly ranked Ladd McConkey was at actually getting open. Because I feel like Drake London is one of those guys who he's going to work on the boundary. He does have that red zone and end zone threat to his game, but Ladd McConkey can do absolutely everything that anybody else can do on a football field, and he also has the value added of the yards after catch per reception. That's what I'm looking for. If you're going to be 120 to 140 target guy, and you're going to tack on points every time you catch the ball, that is the kind of volume that I'm looking at. If you're going to, catch a bunch of deep balls, go down right away. If you're going to be a contested catch guy, that's fine. Ladd is the one who's going to work like a running back in the open field and actually add value to every reception that he has. So I would tend to – this is another situation. Coach and I get into this conversation all the time. Take the value that you can and drop down a tier, because you can super add value somewhere else while everybody else is clamoring for Drake London, and then you're going to get that production out of Ladd McConkey later. So I lean towards my player favorite being Ladd McConkey.
Excellent take, excellent rip between the two of them. It's a very subtle shift between the two of them. Drake London, they're very narrow. London is wide receiver 9 on Underdog at pick 16. And then Ladd McConkey, 3 picks later at wide receiver 11, pick 19, just 3 picks apart in the second round. Over on Destination Devy, the Trinity score is just a path towards predicting future fantasy football goodness. Of course, if situations change, which for Drake London, it will be Michael Penix Jr. being out there all the time. Ladd McConkey and Drake London had a 7.57 for Drake London and a 7.52 for Ladd McConkey. They're near identical. The number 6 is what you want for a score on Trinity. The higher, the better. And of course, into those 7s, that's a beautiful score to see. Funny enough, London and McConkey both had a 39% air yard share. Target share for London, 26% to McConkey's 24%. So they're in the same arena. I really like what they both have to offer. You essentially have to, in a portfolio standpoint, split. Is it 5 and 5? I think you could make a just case for 5 and 5 if you're doing 10 best ball drafts. If you're in Dynasty and you have 10, you split the baby, go 5 and 5. You get the advantage where you can, where you tier in different spots. It's funny enough, we want binary outcomes to how we play, but if you manage from a portfolio standpoint and you come across Ladd McConkey and Drake London, taking a full-on binary stance is going to hurt you because you may be wrong on the player. It might be somebody who's a full Ladd McConkey stan. Problem is, what if Ladd McConkey gets hurt? You could have been right all you wanted. We were right. I was right all I wanted to be with Rashee Rice in 2024, and it sunk 27% of my best ball team. So that's just a little thought I had out there. I like the stance that bigz takes. I could sell the case for Drake London. Drake London, the wide receiver 5 in 2024, to Ladd McConkey's wide receiver 12. But as the season wore on, we really liked how Ladd McConkey got fed. That quarterback and receiver cohesion is there guaranteed. Like Penix, we got a little taste of it. We saw more of that over the season. So there is a slight edge, I would say, to Herbert and McConkey for that cohesion. With Penix and London, we are still anticipating and predicting. It's a very subtle difference, and you can see by the market price on the two of them, these guys are going to be in conversations for a long time. In your drafts, you will be posited with, in your redrafts, Ladd McConkey and Drake London at ADP. Which one do you click? You're going to have some binary outcome with who you commit to. But if you're across a lot of leagues, law of large numbers, I say you split 5 and 5.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that a lot. I mean, like you got to have a little bit of exposure of all these guys, and yeah, Ladd McConkey, I like the upside there because of what bigz mentioned about the opportunity to get like an added value, whether it's a second round or a guy like Jacoby Myers. Yeah, I'd be down with that. Let's move on to our last one. We'll do one more face off here, and we'd be, it's really important that we got to touch base on this rookie class. Let's talk about two running backs here that are, 2 and 3 respectively in a lot of the consensus rankings right now, and that's Kaleb Johnson and Omarion Hampton. And both these guys have got very similar profiles as far as, being huge guys, bruising runners. They both possess intriguing upside, but they come with different strengths but weaknesses at the same time. They're close in rankings. Hampton, 6 feet, 222 pounds. He's physical, downhill running style with the durability to handle a heavy NFL workload. He's got a strong 2024 season at UNC, 1,600 yards, 15 touchdowns on 281 carries. His ball security stands out. 0 fumbles during his college career, and that's a combination of size, power. It makes him a potential workhorse back. However, questions about his agility, his pass blocking, consistency might limit his early down success in certain systems. But Kaleb Johnson, on the other hand, same size, 6 feet, 225 pounds, a little bit heavier. He thrives in the north-south rushing schemes, using his elite burst to break through gaps and his physicality to push through defenders around. His explosiveness, downhill running style, effective when blocking. So, coach, between Hampton's powerful downhill exit, ball security, and Kaleb Johnson's burst and physicality in the open field, who do you think has the higher ceiling in the NFL, assuming both land in favorable matchups?
Well, again, this is
systems.
Oh, absolutely. They will end up being favorable matchups in favorable systems. And especially when we speak of the talent that you're speaking to, Mike, with Hampton and Kaleb Johnson, binary outcomes we talked about just in the last exercise. We want to split 5 and 5. Right now, they're about 7 picks apart, 59 ADP for Omarion Hampton to Kaleb Johnson on Underdog, 66 overall. So we're talking about in that 5th, 6th round range. Hampton and Johnson are there. Rookie running backs, it's Janty, and then there's a little cliff. And of course, it's Hampton, Johnson, and then the 2 Ohio State running backs. Of course, there's further debate on 6 through 10 who could be popping in. Shout out to Ollie Gordon. But I give the edge to Omarion Hampton for his ability to repeat success. When I'm watching Kaleb Johnson, I see film on him. It's your eye of the beholder. When you have him bird in hand, you're watching Kaleb Johnson, you're sitting there thinking, man, I think I got him over Omarion Hampton. And then when you find yourself watching Omarion Hampton, you feel the same way for Hampton. With Hampton, one thing on the ball security, I was watching all 22, and this is just a fun aside. I actually saw him put one ball on the ground. Of course, got recovered. So no lost fumbles for Hampton. Large sample size.
2024, correct?
What?
No lost fumbles in 2024.
Correct. But I believe it was for his whole. I thought it was for his whole career. Maybe I'm wrong on that. For Hampton, he had 1,500 rushing yards in 2023. 1,660 in 2024. His last 2 seasons, Hampton, 29 receptions, 38 receptions. So you like to see that big boost and that jump. From PFF, yards after catch for Hampton, second at 1,222. 72 missed tackles force, ranked 10th. Hampton was 4th in carries of 15 yards or more. So I'm seeing some bursts. I'm not so sure on full out long speed for Hampton, but a lot of physicality. Kaleb burst into 2024 with 1,535 rushing yards. The prior 2 years, Johnson only 463 and 777 rushing yards. Of course, fewer opportunities, lesser opportunity share. So you can only work with what you have. From PFF, Johnson was 6th in yards after contact at 1,060, 66 missed tackles forced, ranked 17th, third in carries of 15 yards or more. So Kaleb and Hampton both measure well in these metrics. These physicality metrics make me wonder how much wiggle room and space between Kaleb and Omarion Hampton they can create at the next level. When I see the physicality metrics compared for Hampton and Johnson, I am left to wonder if the two of them in their own clump is correct. And that's what I see. They really should be in this same clump. Combine metrics will be very important. All things equal, though, give me Omarion Hampton just from the standpoint that he hasn't come out of nowhere per se. Hampton has repeated that success. But again, this could absolutely change Kaleb Johnson to the Vikings. And we are, Chev, I will find you in the cement aisle. What do you guys got for that?
Party
Well,
of two.
I'm going to lean Omarion Hampton, and we're splitting hairs here because physically we're looking at like fairly equal like physicality. There's not going to be a whole lot of derivation in their 40 times. We're talking like late 4.4s, early 4.5s. So there are some concerns that people have as far as Kaleb Johnson's ability in the pass blocking game. Omarion Hampton has a slight edge when it comes to being a receiving back. And then the other thing is you brought up the jump that he had in total rushing yards from over 2023 and 2024. Don't forget who his quarterback was in 2023. That was Drake May, and Drake May was a rushing quarterback. So the fact that Omarion Hampton did that with Drake May as his quarterback, maybe defenses were a little bit more off balance, and so both of them kind of had a beneficial relationship with each other. But the fact is that they were both NFL talents that were both working in the same backfield. Hampton doing it as an underclassman. He slightly gets my edge, and I've maintained that I have a tier 1, a tier 2. That's Genty, and then Hampton. And then the tier 3 starts with Ollie Gordon. Caleb Williams is flipping back and forth depending on who I'm reading and who's watching the tape and things like that. And there are 6 or 7 guys in that tier 3 that, depending on the outcomes of this combine, whether it's agility, then we got landing spot, all that stuff. There's going to be a lot of leapfrog playing. But I lean towards Hampton being by himself in that second tier.
Chev, you had a question for the class.
Oh, yeah, no, I have to go now. So listen, all right. I was a Kaleb Johnson denier, full-on Kaleb Johnson denier. I can't deny him anymore. Like, all of the running backs besides Ashton Genty have warts in this class. And I really did some soul searching on the all-22 because I was team Omarion Hampton, however you say his name, icebox where your heart used to be, Hampton. That guy is that guy. Don't get me wrong. I love him to death. However, after watching a ton of Kaleb Johnson, I came to the conclusion that his ceiling may be higher because he's more scheme versatile than Omarion Hampton. Like, granted, they ran a bunch of plays at North Carolina where Omarion Hampton is just running into the backs of his offensive linemen because they're like, that's the way the run was schemed. But when I watched Omarion Hampton in wide, like, zone schemes out of pistol, and then I watched Kaleb Johnson on like wide zone plays just take it to the crib from like various distances, 50 yards, 60 yards, 70 yards. I watched a run against Ohio State where he just makes a guy miss in the hole. And I think that if he lands in a spot where they're gonna utilize like wide zone or where he gets a runway, it looked like Georgia Todd Gurley if he gets a runway. I'm not saying that he doesn't have that level of athleticism, but he has that level of second level, like get a head full of steam speed. So for me, I think Kaleb Johnson has a slightly higher ceiling if landing in the right spot. Kaleb Johnson, if he hits the hole, full speed, full throttle, full thrust, I think that he's the guy in this class that is going to – he's the guy in this class that you're going to look up and be like, how did we miss this? So I was out. I was a Kaleb Johnson denier, as I said. Omarion Hampton was my RB2, and now I find myself just walking towards the cement aisle, watching Kaleb Johnson highlights in the all 22, and I'm like, what's happening? I don't like this guy, but I can't deny it anymore. I'm no longer a Kaleb Johnson denier. I'm approaching the brick status in the cement aisle for Kaleb
Next,
Johnson.
you're
I
going to watch
needed
some
everybody
Luther
to know
Burden
that.
tape and be like, I used to be. No, I don't think any of us are out on Kaleb Johnson. I think that's the whole
Yeah.
point.
Oh no,
here
that's what I'm saying, Biggs. I was out.
Right.
I was out.
Right. But I think it's interesting that both of them have their closest comps to Tank Bigsby and Zach Charbonnet, and both of those guys are guys that we know are bigger backs that have some explosivity. They have some athleticism. They're not on the Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall level, but they're up there. And you look at their ability in the passing game. What did Zach Charbonnet do when Kenneth Walker went down? He immediately stepped in and he was able to do everything. And both of these guys are comped right there to Zach Charbonnet. They're also coming in as underclassmen where Charbonnet did not. Charbonnet was an older prospect.
Juniors.
So I think what we're looking at is a few guys, a handful of guys who are coming in there that are going to unseat the Zach Charbonnets of this world because they're going to immediately plug in, do exactly what is necessary, but they're doing it with a younger profile. And I'm so excited for this RB class. Like I'm not going to, if I'm in a rookie draft and I'm looking at running back and somebody takes Kaleb Johnson and I have the next pick, I'm not going to be mad because I'm taking Omarion Hampton, and vice versa. If somebody grabs Hampton, I'm not going to be like, no, fine, I'll take Kaleb. I'm going to be happy with either one.
I agree. And the whole reason that I brought that up is because, I was a Kaleb Johnson denier, and I fully admit that. And now
he has been saved.
Yeah, I can no longer in good conscience provide fantasy content and just sit here and be like, yeah, this is just, whatever. Like the high-end comps are ridiculous for me. And I think like the floor comp is a Zach Charbonnet type of outcome for a guy like Kaleb Johnson. And I compared Omarion Hampton to Joe Mixon, but I feel like that might not be high enough either. Like I feel like both of those guys are guys that could be truly special if given volume and a semi-ideal landing spot for fantasy football.
And we haven't even talked about Ollie Gordon and Devin Neal yet. I mean, come on.
And we will get into those guys as this offseason progresses. So great
Always
show,
guys.
Excited for this season, and thanks for everybody for tuning in to the Dynasty Pulse on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network. Stay tuned if you want the longer version. We're getting into
Dynasty Pulse after dark.
Exactly.
Over on the Undroppables.
120 over 80, baby.
Yeah, we're gonna continue this show on doing some rookie draft content. So stay tuned if you're into that. But from all of us on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network, on the Undroppables, on Fantasy Football Plus Network, we are pumped for you tuning into the Dynasty Pulse. We'll see you next time. And
we hope you win.
We hope you win.
Stay bricked up in the cement aisle.